From Jordan Peterson giving us the cold, hard truth we needed to hear, to having an honest discussion with yourself about where you're headed, Jordan Peterson has finally revealed the secret to stop being weak. You'd think that the man's living inside your head. Peterson struck a chord with almost everyone when he gave the all-too-familiar example of someone trying to win everyone over at a party and then returning home feeling resentful and bitter. It resonated with just about everyone. Honestly, how often have you come home from a party or any sort of social event and replayed the whole day over and over again, either beating yourself up for leaving a few things unsaid or not establishing your boundaries correctly? Why didn't you? Well, according to the psychologist, it's because we have this misconstrued belief that the only way we'd be liked and largely accepted is to present ourselves as punching bags. You could say that's not the case from now till forever. But that's exactly what happens when we're placed in a situation where we want to fit in. In order to be more likable, we believe that 1 or 2 jabs are necessary. It gets everyone laughing, the ball rolling, and then you're integrated into the crowd. Only that's not what happens. It never does, actually. In reality, though, we wind up being the center of attention for the entire evening because we fail to set any boundaries at all, let alone any that are clear. That's what Peterson calls a persona. The psychologist believes that there's never just one version of a human being. It's never a case of what you see is what you get. People have many personas based on where they are and who they're with. The persona that we just talked about is when a human being is at their weakest, and not so much because the odds are stacked against them, but because they've come to accept that being weak is their safest bet. Then there's something that Peterson calls the shadow self. It's a clear giveaway, but the shadow self is the side of you that only you know about. This includes your aggression, resentfulness, and darker emotions. Unlike your personas, you only have one shadow self. What separates you from revealing that shadow self to the whole world is morality. So, despite feeling resentful for being picked on, you don't act on your aggression because of morality. However, is it really doing anyone any favors? You're clearly drawing the shortest straw over and over again, and the people who are picking on you will move on to the next guy in a minute. So, should you let your shadow self take control? It's a bit of a yes and no from Peterson, actually, who wants you to remember that it's important to keep some of that aggression in mind when you present yourself as a punching bag. Instead of beating yourself up over what you could have said back then, you need to be clearer and more assertive in that moment, and let some of that aggression come out. The amount of aggression, however, is based on your morality, not the nonsensical reasoning you've come up with to be everyone's patsy, but real morality. For example, you can't be overly aggressive and combative whenever anyone takes a jab at you. That would make you an outcast, and you'd see yourself falling deeper and deeper into a dark hole of isolation. On the other hand, if you make it clear that some things and certain subjects are off limits, you're not coming off as combative, rather. You seem sophisticated. So there are 2 extremes you need to be careful of. One's where you appear weak enough to be called a pushover, and the other's when you're combative enough to be an outcast. You have to remember that at the end of the day, you'd have to interact with other humans one way or another. Whether it's at work, at a social event, or even in your own family, you can't avoid people. Not forever. The only way to actually feel like you fit in and really see a change in your social standing is to be assertive with your needs, wants, and boundaries, and always maintain clear communication. If you've been confusing morality with tolerating just about anything people throw at you, you'll find yourself at the bottom of the food chain. Think about it from a workplace perspective. The person who's almost always passed on for a promotion isn't necessarily the most incompetent person in the workforce. Likewise, the person who's a shoo-in for a top-floor office isn't always the best at their job either. The only difference between the 2 people in this case is that one has a more domineering personality that's still likable, and the other is perceived as weak. This is an all too common example. So, what does it really take to get that office on the top floor? It certainly isn't compassion, not according to Peterson. The psychologist has been the subject of controversy for a long time, and that's usually because of some of his hot takes that are left at agree to disagree. But the one thing everyone can agree on is that being 100% compassionate isn't a sign of virtue. If anything, it's a sign of weakness. Here's an example. When you think of the most compassionate person on the planet, you think of a parent with their newborn. Not only does the parent feed, bathe, and look after the child, but they do it with a smile on their face. You couldn't pay them all the money in the world to disregard their child, Not if they're the picture-perfect example of a parent who's supposed to be 100% compassionate. Besides that example, though, can you think of any other instance where you'd have to be 100% compassionate? Do you really think the guy who's getting a promotion over you is getting it because they've established tremendous compassion? You know the answer. Just because the people around you throw temper tantrums doesn't mean they're your toddlers and should be dealt with compassionately. To revert back, though, the only way to not be weak is to let your shadow side have some control. In an ideal world, the most respected person would be the one who's the kindest. Fortunately or not, we live in an imperfect world where the most respected person is still considerably kind, but also assertive. It's the concept of love and justice, a pretty common concept in religion that states that God loves you more than anything, but he also believes in setting you straight if you go out of line. That's a very realistic way to get other people to like you without ever compromising on your morals. If you let your shadow self take control, just a little, you'll see your persona morph from being a pushover and a patsy to someone that people don't want to mess with because they respect them too much. According to Peterson, the only way for you to achieve this persona, a strong one, is to find a balance between morality and your shadow self, with a little more leaning towards your shadow self in terms of demanding respect and authority. If you know that something's not in your best interest, stop doing it. This might seem like a very obvious piece of advice, but according to Peterson, you'd be amazed at the number of people who continue to do things that are harmful to their self-esteem just because they can't stop. Now, you'd think that they couldn't stop because of some external force, but the truth is that the only thing stopping them is themselves. What's stopping you from speaking your mind when someone's walking all over you? What's keeping you from telling someone that you're uncomfortable? And why is it that you can't find your voice when you know you have the answers? Truthfully, Peterson claims that once you realize that the alleged mountain between you and your goals is nothing but your own apprehensions, you'll see an obvious change. Now, Peterson's worked with people his entire life, and he's not one to tell you that change happens in a day. Realistically, it takes time and effort. However, some people retreat in their shells because they believe no amount of effort could ever help them change into better versions of themselves. Change starts small, but its effects are widespread. And according to Peterson, you just have to make one small change every single day to be able to witness a massive change in how you're being treated and perceived at the end of the week. Honestly, it's really that simple. In the end, the best way to change yourself is to be honest with yourself. You have to understand that the only one who's ever in your corner is you yourself. So, it doesn't make sense that after getting beaten up by everyone else, you come home and beat yourself up some more. Yes, you need to be realistic and honest with yourself, but you shouldn't leave your own corner. According to Peterson, the best way to see a change in yourself is to rationalize your thoughts and emotions at that moment and make a decision based on logic and not fueled by emotion, such as an incessant need to be liked by everyone. Here's the truth. No matter what you do, you can't have the whole world on your side. Best you can do is a few people you meet and interact with. The only person who shouldn't leave your side, though, is you yourself. So, from having an honest discussion with yourself about where you're headed, to Jordan Peterson giving us the cold hard truth we needed to hear, those were the secrets of how to stop being weak, according to Jordan Peterson.